Hi there, this is Pride Weekly. We'll start with Monday, and we're into Aromantic Spectrum Awareness Week. Aromantic people experience hardly any or no romantic attraction whatsoever. And then you've got aro-ace, aromantic asexual, where someone also feels little or no sexual attraction. So they are two separate things, aromantic and asexual, but you can be both. For a bit of clarity about aromanticism, this TikTok from ESO Snail's pretty useful.
Romantic attraction and romantic action are two different things. Romantic attraction is like a crush. Romantic action is boyfriend, girlfriend, dates. Just because I don't experience romantic attraction doesn't mean I can't do romantic actions.
Zimbabwe says it'll block a university scholarship for young queer people. It was created in 2018 by the GALS Association that works for the rights and welfare of LGBTQ+ people there, aged 18 to 35. The idea was the scholarship would help those disowned by their families for being queer who'd struggle to pay for higher education. All of a sudden, 6 years later, it's now being called a direct challenge to the authority of the government, which says LGBTQ+ people have alien, un-African and un-Christian values. And we've all been there. 1 minute you're on a train, next thing you're having intimate relations on top of it. A moving train. It's what two men seem to be up to in New York. If you go by some photos doing the rounds, they were fairly unambiguous, so don't go searching for them, you rotter. The Transport Authority there is calling the men reckless clowns. A third person pictured on top of the train appears to be spectating. It's Pride Daily for Tuesday. It's come out a transgender teenager who was murdered in America last year was stabbed nearly 40 times. The body of Jacob Williamson was found last June in South Carolina, 4 days after he'd been due to go on a date with a man he'd met online. He would have turned 19 this week, and we also now know his body was mutilated. Family friend Promise Edwards had been looking after Jacob. She told WBTV things had been tough for him, but they'd been getting better.
This world was so cruel to Jacob for his entire life. And I find peace in knowing that in the last month and a half he found peace. And now he's finally at peace.
A man and woman have been charged over the killing, which isn't being investigated as a hate crime. Gay sex will remain illegal in St Vincent and the Grenadines. A top court in the southern Caribbean nation has upheld laws that can see people locked up for 10 years. Human Rights Watch says it's a travesty. Over the last few years, gay sex has been legalised in its Caribbean neighbours, Antigua, St Kitts and Barbados. The anti-gay law is rarely used, but it's thought to encourage abuse of LGBTQ+ people. And for the first time, a lesbian couple in Nepal have had their marriage officially registered. Anju Devi Shrestha and Suprita Gurung have got their legal recognition in the capital city of Kathmandu. The country's Supreme Court issued an interim order allowing same-sex marriages to be registered 8 months ago. The first was in November. It's Pride Daily for Wednesday. A man's believed to have murdered his teenage son in Iran because of his feminine behaviour. Claims from a news agency suggest the father felt dishonoured by the 17-year-old who wore makeup. The man said he felt publicly shamed and that everyone was pointing their fingers at him. His son's sexual and gender identity isn't known. Homosexuality carries the death penalty there and discrimination's widespread. It's common for queer people to be attacked by family members. Shia Goldust tells Global News why she left the country to start a new life in Canada.
I had a lot of problem in Iran as a trans woman, harassment and discrimination. But you can't go to police and you can't tell to police because it's your fault, because you are different.
Human rights organisation Article 19 says the murder is an example of the gender apartheid that exists in Iran. The latest thing causing consternation for the terminally outraged is transgender breast milk. A UK health trust says it's just as good as what's produced by a woman whose birth gender's female. Trans women can take medication to allow them to lactate, although occasionally they can manage it without. The pushback includes claims this is all to do with identity politics and babies are being used as guinea pigs. And America's census could soon include questions about sexual orientation and gender identity. Some trial questions are being sent out to 480,000 households. They include what sex were you assigned at birth, plus multiple choice options for sexuality. Concerns have been flagged up, though, that ultimately adults could answer for their children in the census without knowing if they're queer. It's Pride Daily for Thursday. Belarus wants to copy its neighbour Russia and bring in an anti-LGBTQ+ propaganda law. Proposals have been drawn up by the Eastern European country that outlaw the promotion of abnormal relationships, paedophilia, and the voluntary refusal to have children. The Belarus president, Alexander Lukashenko, called gay men perverts last year, and the ultimate abomination, a phrase I now want printed on a t-shirt. He's not so hardline about lesbians, though.
I forgive women for their lesbianism, he said, but I'll never in my lifetime forgive men for being gay. A woman becomes a lesbian only if we men are so wretched.
So now you know, thanks to Euronews for the translation. Being gay is legal in Belarus, but there's no same-sex marriage and adoption, with some pride parades being banned in recent years. There are plans to open a lesbian bar for biological women only in London later this year. The L community venue will be set up as a private members club, so it can legally refuse to accept trans women. A feminist campaigner called Jenny Watson's behind it. She's previously organised lesbian speed dating events for adult human females only. Says she's not transphobic, and when she was at university, she lived with 2 trans people. And an LGBTQ+ bar in Dublin's having a prom night for queer people of a certain age. Street 66 says it'll let those who feel they missed out on this kind of occasion when they were younger finally have their moment. The theme is Lust for Life, and it's happening in May. It's Pride Daily for Friday. As if life isn't hard enough for queer people in Africa, Ghana's now a step closer to making it that much worse. An amendment that was delaying a vote in Parliament on a harsh new anti-LGBTQ+ law has been withdrawn, so it could now be passed within weeks. The plans are up to 10 years in prison for the promotion of queer rights and to increase the jail term for gay sex from 3 years to 5. Across Africa, it's just as bleak. Uganda brought in the death penalty last year for what it calls aggravated homosexuality. This Ghanaian MP, talking to DW News, attempts to justify the proposed law, and spoiler alert, he doesn't.
In our constitution, sexual preference is not a human right. It's not a fundamental right. Okay, it's a preference. And even if there was a right, our constitution says that rights can be curtailed so long as they pose an existential threat to the public safety, public health, and public morals. This act of homosexuality poses a public health challenge and a public morals challenge.
The United Nations says the law's a system of state-sponsored discrimination and violence against sexual minorities. The medical regulator in the UK says it's truly sorry for what it was doing in the past, ending the careers of gay doctors. Talking about men who had or tried to have consensual sex with other men, and when the General Medical Council found out, the doctors were struck off or given warnings. This was happening for about 100 years, up until the 1990s. And an LGBTQ+ museum's opening in Australia this weekend. Qtopia's based in a former police station in Sydney. It's where some gay rights marchers were brutally beaten by officers in 1978 after being arrested for their involvement in a peaceful protest. An official apology came nearly 40 years later. The museum says it's devoted to the memory, education and celebration of the unique histories and lived experiences of queer people. And I'm so roddy old now, they might have me as one of the exhibits. I'm Kev McGrath. See you Monday.